Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Today we will continue where we left off in the book of Ibn Al-Qayyim, The Illness and the Cure. Last time we spoke about dua, and we mentioned that we would continue where we left off from. And I will let you know that it is a series, and so I do recommend that you see the previous videos as well of the playlist. Where we left off last is about dua, and the next station that Ibn Al-Qayyim mentions in his book is the relationship between dua and qadr, and many misconceptions which happen between the relationship of dua and qadr, between supplication and divine decree, between asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something and what's written, what is already written in the divine record, in the qadr. And people have many misunderstandings about how these two interact. And so we'll leave the details about that for the next session, because first we need to properly understand what even is qadr, what even is divine decree. And once you understand what is divine decree, it'll make it a lot easier to understand what is the relationship between dua and qadr. So how do you understand qadr? What is qadr? Qadr can be translated into divine decree. Now the modern pop culture translation you might have of qadr is like some understanding that is fate or destiny, that's something that's forced upon you, something like that. Unfortunately, our understanding of qadr can be very easily skewed by like literally just pop culture and movies and stuff. Rather, this is how you understand qadr. This is how qadr is in Islam. Qadr, which is divine decree. In summary, if I were to make it simple, qadr is a pillar of iman. It is a pillar of iman, just like believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, believing in his messengers, believing in his books and his angels, and believing in the day of judgment. Qadr is a pillar of iman necessary to your faith, just like believing in God and believing in what I've mentioned so far are also pillars of faith. So it is essential. It is an essential and necessary part of being a Muslim. Yeah. So, alright, so therefore it's quite important for us to have some understanding of qadr, or at least, at the very least, even if we don't fully comprehend it, that we submit to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us about what it is. Yeah. Qadr is, if I were to summarize it, it's all about the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is directly and deeply tied to the fact that Allah knows everything. Yeah. Allah knows what has happened, what is happening, and He also knows what is going to happen until the Day of Judgment. He knows everything that is going to happen. And that is qadr. Qadr is broken down into four stations, into four parts. The knowledge of Allah, the fact that Allah knows everything. He then wrote everything onto a record, onto the لوح المحفوظ, that it is all recorded. What is going to happen is recorded with Him in a tablet. That is the knowledge of Allah. That is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has then written it. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has willed it to be, and then He has created it. Yeah, that's just for the details, but to be fully honest, the core of it all is the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is at the beginning, and it is the most important part of it. If you get this part, it's already solved. You understand everything about qadr. Then alright, so what does it mean that qadr is the knowledge of Allah? So let me ask you, the most typical and really worn down example of this is the teacher and the bad student. Okay, so you have a teacher who has taught the student, who has told him what is coming in the exam, who has spent the entire year with him, teaching him and helping him. And yet the teacher knows extremely well, just because of what he's seen from the student, he knows very, very well exactly what is going to happen. Yeah, he knows that the student is going to fail for sure, because the student is an absolute slacker. He has not studied a day in his life, and he refuses to do so. Yeah, that the teacher continues to tell the student, it continues to help the student, gives him extra classes, everything. The student just does not study. He spends his entire day on video games, and this never changes for him. Yeah, and then comes the day of the exam. Okay, does the teacher know what's going to happen? The teacher knows exactly what's going to happen. He knows that he's going to give the student the exam paper, and the student's not going to know how to answer a single thing. Yeah, whose fault is it that the student failed? The fault is the student. It's not the teacher's fault, because the teacher gave him everything. It's not the teacher's fault that he gave him the exam paper. The teacher tested this student just like he tested all the students. And all the students have their responsibility. And he's told them their responsibility, made it clear to them. And he's given them their exam papers. There is no fault on the teacher, rather the fault is on the student. Even though the teacher knows exactly what's going to happen, that hasn't changed the fact that it is the student's responsibility that he should have studied. Yeah, the teacher knows that the student wasn't going to study, but that's not the teacher's fault. Yeah, it is the student's shortcoming. It is the student's responsibility which he has failed. Yeah, if you say, oh no, the teacher shouldn't have given the student the exam paper because he's not going to fail, just think about what you would have said if like, think about that sentence again. Yeah. Would it be reasonable for a teacher to just withhold an exam paper because, oh, the student didn't study, therefore I know he's going to fail? What are you going to do then? Are you going to fail him without him being tested, like being given the exam paper? Or are you going to just pass him immediately? That's also unfair on the students that did study. Yeah, we are in this life as a test, just like that. Yeah. SubhanAllah, this and to Allah belongs the best example. This is just something to bring the meaning closer. That just because the teacher knew what was going to happen doesn't mean the teacher forced the student to not study. The teacher certainly did not drag the student by the hand to the video games and made him play all day long. No, rather the case is that it was the student's responsibility and he flunked it and it was his fault. Yeah, even though the teacher knew exactly what was going to happen. So that's and once again, to Allah belongs the best example. That is just a way to sort of bring the concept of Qadar closer to our minds. So Qadar is tied to the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's not based on like, oh, he's seen patterns, therefore he knows what is going to happen based on patterns, like the teacher. No, he knows everything already. Before the creation was even created, he knows exactly what is going to happen. And yet, the one who does good, it is their responsibility. The one who does bad, it is their responsibility, and they are going to meet what they did. Yeah, subhanAllah. So, what is my evidence for this? Am I just making stuff up? And is there any evidence in the Quran and the Sunnah that supports this fact? Do we have the freedom of choice? What? I thought Qadr was just that I'm being pulled like a puppet on a string. Well, this is well known. It is extremely well known and ubiquitous throughout the Quran. This concept of that we have the ability to choose, that we have that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the ability to choose, unlike the angels who just worship, that they're only able to worship, they're only able to obey. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made us special, that He has given us the ability to choose. This concept of this ability to choose, it is ubiquitous. It is well, like Ibn Al-Qayyim mentioned in his book that had it been 100 ayat or 200 ayat which point towards this concept that we have this ability to choose, had it been 100 ayat, 200 ayat, he would have mentioned them in his book and would have quoted them. However, they are more than 1,000 ayat, and so it's too excessive for him to quote them all in his book. That, think about it, every ayah in the Quran which speaks about heaven and hellfire, and about responsibility, and about reward and punishment. How do you reward someone and punish someone if they are puppets on a string? So imagine that I took someone, dragged him by the hair, forced his mouth open, and force-fed him some pork, or force-fed him some alcohol, just as an example, yeah? Would this person be sinful? Of course not. He didn't do anything, yeah? So, just like that, if a person was a puppet on a string, and he is being, quote-unquote, forced to do what he's doing, then is he to be held responsible for what he's being forced to do? Of course not. Neither is the sinful person blameworthy, nor the righteous person praiseworthy, because they're just being forced, they're just puppets on a string. So it's absolutely incoherent. Rather, the case is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions reward and mentions punishment because we have the ability to choose, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the ability to choose, and He will reward and punish accordingly. And so that's what Qadar is. If I were to summarize it, it is the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's nice, that's theoretical, but you know what? Qadr is far more than that. Qadr is beautiful. It is absolute. It gives, I'm telling you the personal input right now. It is like, it gives me such comfort to my heart, to my own heart, this concept of Qadr. Because you gotta understand it to its fullest. Qadr means everything is there with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is recorded with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can will certain things, we can desire to do certain things, but what will end up happening is a different story, yeah? What will end up happening is a different story. Nothing happens except if Allah allows it. Nothing happens except if Allah allows it. And Allah will only allow what He allows based on His wisdom, based on it fitting into His great plan, yeah? So Qadr is also this concept of the great plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that everything goes according to plan. And this is such a beautiful concept. Everything goes according to plan. Nothing, so number one, this concept of Qadar is that nothing surprises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can't do something that surprises Allah. He knows everything that's going to happen. Yeah, that's the gist of understanding Qadar. But as well, this other part of Qadar is that there are certain things that we can't fully control. Yeah, we can't necessarily control the outcomes of our actions. Yeah, the outcomes of our desires. We do what we do and we desire what we desire, but it's not everything that we want to do ends up happening. Yeah, or not everything that we do end up doing has the intended effect that we had intended, because ultimately what will happen, ultimately what will end up taking effect is exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had planned and willed and allowed. Yeah, so this is the other amazing part of Qadar. And so why is this so beautiful? It's to know that, as the Nabi has mentioned in a Sahih Hadith, that مَا أَصَابَكَ مَا كَانَ لِيُخْطِئُكَ وَمَا أَخْطَأَكَ مَا كَانَ لِيُصِيبَكَ. That whatever had hit you would never have missed you, and whatever missed you would never have hit you. And so you live life chill, you live life relaxed, because oh no, I was supposed to do that, and then this happened, and this was supposed to happen, and this could have happened, and why didn't I, etc. Just calm down. Yeah, everything is going according to plan. All that matters is that I make sure I'm not blameworthy. Yeah, I make sure I'm not blameworthy. So the same example of the student and the teacher. There's a world of difference between the student who, that previous student which we mentioned, the slacker, versus a student who he did everything, but then on the day of the exam, he got ill, or something happened to him, or he studied the wrong subject, or whatever it may have been, and he ended up failing the paper on that day. Yeah, it's a world of difference. The first student which we had mentioned is an obviously blameworthy student. The second student is not a blameworthy student. Just things happened. They happened to him. Yeah, it's not his fault. He's not blameworthy, and he's not sinful. And so, because he's not blameworthy, he can rest assured. Likewise, we live our entire lives with the same mentality, that we make sure that we're not blameworthy. We make sure that we're not the ones with shortcomings. And then we accept what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent our way. And it's with this beautiful concept, this concept of being pleased with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written, being pleased with whatever is coming our way, that we just have this beautiful rest in our hearts, this beautiful relaxation in our hearts, because we know that it is all going according to plan. Whatever is happening, regardless of what we see throughout the world, even if there is suffering throughout the world, why is this, why is that happening? Yes, Allah is all-knowing. He knows what's happening. He is the all-good and the all-powerful. He is good and He is able to change the current circumstance. However, He is also the all-wise. He has let the things that are happening happen for a reason that is known to Him, for an ultimate wisdom that is known to Him. And like I like to mention, is that you do recognize that you are an overgrown toddler, right? You do recognize that to question Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the all-knowing, is akin to a dog questioning a professor of mathematics about an equation. Yeah, we only know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught us. So we need to be humble with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We really need to recognize this point. God doesn't make mistakes. God doesn't have shortcomings. God doesn't wrong anyone. Yeah, everything is according to what is the best. Yeah, this is the best. This is the greatest good. That is what is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is absolutely amazing. And when you have this in your heart, like this is a sort of interconnected topic, this topic of being content with what is in the Qadar, being content with what comes your way. If you stay content with what comes your way in regards to Qadar, you'll be the richest person alive, because you're not missing anything. Yeah, you're just happy with whatever comes your way. As Nabi ﷺ mentioned in a hadith which is graded Sahih by Al-Albani, in a section of the hadith, he mentions, 𝗿𝗲𝗰𝗲 قَسَمَ اللَّهُ لَكَ تَكُنْ أَغْنَى النَّاسِ. That be pleased with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you, and you will be the richest person. SubhanAllah. And the last part of what I wanted to mention is that Qadar is not an excuse. You don't use Qadar as an excuse. You don't look into Qadar as a future tense, that, oh well, if it was the Qadar of Allah, XYZ will happen, and so I'm just gonna do whatever, and if it's in the Qadar of Allah, then whatever it is, it will happen. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. That's like saying, oh, if it's the Qadr of Allah that I will be satiated, that I will be full in the tummy, it will happen, yeah? Regardless of whether I eat or I don't eat, yeah? And so you don't live your life like that. Rather, you do your part and you leave the rest to Allah. And you make sure that you're not blameworthy, and you accept what comes from the Qadar. You study your exam and you leave the results for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're not questioned. You're not questioned to produce results. You're only questioned to put in the effort. You're questioned to do your part. And then as for the results, as for what is going to happen, as for what's going to happen and is written in the Qadar, that you're not being punished for. That you're not being taken into account for. You're being taken account into, are you blameworthy or not? La ilaha illallah. And so if I were to summarize it, Qadar is the ultimate consolation. Qadar is not an excuse. You don't say, oh, if it was a Qadr of Allah, I would have passed, yeah, regardless of whether I study or not. No, rather, you must study, and if you don't study and you failed, you're blameworthy. If you did study and you failed, then you're not blameworthy. Simple as that, yeah, and the Qadr will happen as it happens. And there's a beautiful set of ayat in Surah Al-Hadid that I will finish with. That 𝗿𝗲𝘃𝗍𝗍 ما أصاب من مصيبة في الأرض ولا في أنفسكم إلا في كتاب من قبل أن نبرأها إن ذلك على الله يسير لكي لا تأسوا على ما فاتكم ولا تفرحوا بما آتاكم والله لا يحب كل مختال فخور الذين يبخلون ويأمرون الناس بالبخل ومن يتول فإن الله هو الغني الحميد. That no calamity or blessing occurs on earth or within yourselves without being written in a record before we bring it into being. This is certainly easy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We let you know this so that you neither grieve over what you have missed, nor boast over what He has granted you. For Allah does not like those who are arrogant and boastful, those who are stingy and promote stinginess among people, and whoever turns away should know that Allah alone is truly the self-sufficient and praiseworthy. So if I were to set things straight and make it clear and just to put a final summary to it, and some take-home messages, is that number one is that Qadar is a pillar of Iman, just like believing in Allah and His messengers and books and angels in the last day are all pillars of Iman. And number two, that Qadar is the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then there are other things, but then it all ultimately boils down, its core is the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that what is going to happen is going to happen. Number three is that we have the ability to choose. Yes, Allah knows what our final choice is. Yes, Allah knows the outcomes, but just like we gave the example of the student, His knowledge of the outcomes doesn't change the fact that we are responsible for our actions. The student is still responsible to study, even if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the outcome. And that we are not puppets on a string. Allah knows the outcomes, however, we are not puppets on a string. And the other matter is the other side of Qadr, which is it being the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That we do have a freedom to choose, but at the same time, there are certain limitations. We can choose sometimes whatever we like, but what will end up happening is a different story, yeah? What will end up happening is what Allah allows, yeah? Yes, Allah knows everything, that is the Qadr. The Qadr is the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, there's also the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set out a plan. Certain things a person will, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will triumph over that. And so even if a person wills, or a person even does something, the effect that the person desires will only happen to the extent that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it. How many times has it happened to you that you want to do something, or even you do something, and then the result or the end thing that happens is totally not what you expected? Yeah, because everything goes according to the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we know this and we take this to heart, that whatever hit you would never have missed you, whatever missed you would never have hit you, we would live our lives relaxed, really. You know, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. This is what I wanted to conclude with. May Allah bless you. I wish you all the best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.